Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, and we have a special guest and a special treat, really, for everybody here on the Must Read Alaska Show today. We have Representative Sarah Vance from District 31. And before we get into the segment today, which is 5 questions, I do want to say a couple things first. First, I want to thank our sponsor. We have a sponsor of the Must Read Alaska Show, folks. This is like big news for us because it's literally Suzanne and I, Suzanne in her living room, and I'm in my son's bedroom most of the time on our little computers, and we're competing against podcasts out there with multi-million-dollar budgets and staff and $10,000 fancy radio microphones, and so we're pretty excited about the fact that we have a sponsor. That kind of makes it feel like we've finally arrived. And our sponsor for the show, not just this episode, but the entire Must Read Alaska show, is Charlie Pierce for Governor. So we want to thank Charlie Pierce for Governor for sponsoring the show because of folks like him and folks like him on his campaign that have made the decision to sponsor our show. We are able to spread conservative news far and wide in all the nooks and crannies of Alaska. So thank you so much, Charlie Pierce for Governor, for sponsoring the Must Read Alaska show. It's pretty awesome. We feel pretty excited about it. So for those of you who have just tuned in, I've got Representative Sarah Vance from District 31 on the Must Read Alaska show today. You can find us you can find the Must Read Alaska show on Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, iHeartRadio. You can tell Alexa to play us. You can pretty much find us anywhere there's any sort of podcast. We're very excited to have the number 2 ranked podcast on Podbean in the government section, and they have a thing called Listen Notes, which is basically the Billboard chart of podcasts, and we have a top 1% global ranking in all of podcasts. So we're very excited about that. It's only because of folks like you that listen to our show and share our show. So today we have the segment called 5 Questions, where we're going to go 5 questions with Representative Sarah Vance and give her an opportunity to talk about what she's excited about, what she's doing. So welcome to the show, Representative Sarah Vance. Before we go into the 5 questions, why don't you just tell everybody just a little bit about who you are and your district that you represent, because you never know, there's somebody that may be in Nome that has maybe never heard of you. So feel free to just talk for a second about who you are and what district you represent.
Good morning, John. I'm Representative Sarah Vance, and I represent the Lower Kenai Peninsula. So when you're in Soldotna on the south side, from those stoplights all the way to the head of the bay in Homer. So it's a bit larger than what most people realize, but it runs right down the road, very coastal, very artistic, and a lot of strong conservatives.
That's awesome. Well, we are very excited that you unseated Seaton back in the day. So that's pretty exciting. So Sarah, the first question is this: what got you involved in politics in the first place? I think it's important for folks to hear these stories directly from our elected officials.
Well, John, I first met Suzanne at the very beginning of my foray into politics, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And interestingly enough, she was the one who told me that I have what it takes. And because I had no idea what was involved. I was just a stay-at-home mom raising 4 children, homeschooling, just completely engaged in their lives, and didn't watch the news. I didn't want all the negativity in my life. I was focused on my happy life, and the priority was my family and living right around the corner from my parents. Happy little life living under my rock. And then an event, things were happening in Homer, and someone reached out to me over Facebook and said, "Are you aware of a situation at the Homer City Council?" There was a resolution that that wanted to make Homer a sanctuary city, and it was very unconstitutional and gave us a lot of great concern. And so that spread like wildfire around Homer, and several of us got together and decided that it was time that we spoke up at the city council and said something about it. And we met, about a dozen of us met together for lunch on that Monday, and decided, hey, who's going to say what, so that everyone could have a turn to speak. And what we didn't know is that more than 200 people filled the council chambers that night, which for Homer, it was a packed house. And we then decided to recall 3 of the council members because they tried to hide the fact that they were wanting to make Homer a sanctuary city. And Suzanne covered this story at length. And it was just kind of one of those eye-opening things that, maybe I need to start paying attention to what's going on in my hometown. And I quickly became the voice for that group. And people said, please don't stop speaking for us. It was not something that I was aspiring to do. I just said, I don't like the way this is going. I should get involved. I need to say something. And that quickly became, would you run for state house? And I told people they were crazy. I really did. I turned them down. It was something that I said, I have small children. I have no idea about any of this. I didn't even know the name of my mayor when I started getting involved with speaking up at the city council. And so I was asked later, I ran for city council and lost terribly. And it taught me a lot. But people still said, please don't stop speaking for us. So just the engagement with the community, that they needed a voice. They needed someone to speak for them based upon their values and their priorities. And when I got a phone call again saying, we really would like you to consider running for state house, I graciously said no, and I hung up the phone, and my husband said, I think we can do this. And it was at that moment that I thought, well, if my husband thinks that we can do it, surely we can. And I started looking at what it would take to run for state house, and I was given a 1% shot of winning.
1%.
1%.
I love it.
So,
they all said, you're probably unexperienced and too conservative and stalker mom and all the 10 different other things.
I tell people, anyone can do this. Anyone can do this. They said, how do you understand, the laws and the ordinances? I read it over and over until it finally clicked. I looked it up. I took advantage of the city website, which we have a really great website. We have so much available to us on the internet now that I would stay up until 2 a.m. reading the budget and learning how it flowed together. And that was something that I could do. So I encourage people, wherever you're at, whatever it is, you can do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. And here I am in my second term.
That's awesome. One of the things I want to make sure our folks hear when you tell your story there is that it wasn't all high fives and hugs, that you in fact lost your first time that you raced. And, some of the folks that I look back at being successful in the political world, they actually lost their first race. George H.W. Bush lost his first race. His son, George W. Bush, lost his first race. And to be quote unquote successful in the political world, you just have to start somewhere. And sometimes that start includes a loss right out the gate, and that will teach you the things you need to do to get out there and win. And so I'm very thankful that you kept going, because you are doing an awesome job. So the second question is this, Representative Vance, who have you looked up to in the political world and why?
This is a tough question for me. because I'm not political. People laugh at me when I say that, but like I said, I didn't know the name of my mayor. People asked me who I voted for a decade ago in the presidential race. I have no idea. I voted. I just, it wasn't a big priority of mine. So I didn't have political people that I aspired to that we would consider conventional people. But there are unconventional people that are definitely engaged in politics, because there's politics even in the PTA and our churches. And there was pastors in Bible college that were a big influence to me, that always had the mindset of positivity, and that it didn't matter how difficult things were, that things could be overcome. And Pastor Marilyn Hickey is a woman of faith who has traveled the world, and she's ministered in some Islamic countries, and they welcome her. And the royalty has welcomed her because she brings such goodness to their communities, a lot of healing and food, and does a lot of good things that just open the door for her in very hostile countries. When ISIS was, just wreaking havoc in the Middle East, they welcomed her because she was revered as holy. And I just watched her respond with grace. And that's what I want to do, is no matter how hard things are or sticky a situation, I want to make room for whoever's there and provide grace. And that's a learning curve for me, because I'm a mom. And so I'd rather just correct someone and come on, let's go. There's no crying in baseball. Just, you'll be fine. But that's not always what people need. And so those are the times that I remember how she responded, and making room for people, and always have a positive outlook. And I think that works well in politics, or even in some of the tougher conditions of mission work as well.
That's awesome. What's something that you've accomplished in your life that you're super proud of?
I would have to say that is definitely being a mother and raising my children, and the life with my husband. When I look back at what I wanted to be as a little girl, I wanted to be a mom and do great things for Jesus. And everything that I had asked the Lord for, I've done. And so I just staying the course for those little girl dreams of not overcomplicating things. I'm proud of that, and just seeing who my family has become. And my oldest is 18, and she is realizing her little girl dreams. And so when we can keep that going and just encourage others through our journey, that's what I'm most proud of. It's one of those simple things in life that it's not any big achievement. It's all of the little achievements along the way that have added up to being what I'm most proud of.
That's awesome. Time seems to fly. Seems like I flicked a switch and now I have a 13-year-old daughter. So I'm going to try to enjoy these last couple of years before she goes off to college and becomes the president of the United States. So
very possible.
What's something that maybe you've done in your life that you wish you would have done differently? Maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge regret or anything, but what's something that you look back and you're like, man, I wish I would have done that a little different?
I wish that I would have believed in myself more when I was in high school and in college, and looking at what I was capable of doing. I really wished I would have gone for that law degree. Studied the Constitution more. I've never wanted to understand law and the Constitution more than I have now. And I think we're seeing the value of that in our nation today, is really understanding the direction that our founding fathers were looking to, and really the essence of our Constitution, and not just what they teach in law school of how to overcome the Constitution, but really to uphold it. And that was something that I was interested in early on, but I didn't believe that I could finish, that I had what it takes to have a 4-year degree. And I also didn't want to become a career mom. I'm a homebody. And now I'm going, I think maybe that would have come in handy. And I didn't plan for other possibilities and what life would be like when my children had gotten older. And that would have done differently. But I'm also reminded that my story isn't over. So that's still a possibility.
Your story's still being written, right?
Yes.
Which is exciting. So one of the things that you are doing right now is very exciting for me, which is I don't know the exact name of the bill, but it's a patient advocacy bill, which you can tell us all about. And I think this is very exciting for Alaskans. So if you're just now tuning into the Must Read Alaska show right now, whether you're on Facebook Live or on iTunes, I'm your host, John Quick, and we have Representative Sarah Vance of District 31 talking to us about what we have, what I call the segment of 5 questions, and we're down to the last question or so. And Representative Vance has been working on a patient advocacy bill, which is very exciting for all. It should be exciting for all Alaskans. It's not just exciting for Democrats or just exciting for Republicans or just exciting for conservatives or liberals. This is a bill that stretches across party lines and really gives a voice to those who didn't have a voice for the last couple of years during the COVID craziness. So Representative Vance, tell us about this bill and why it should matter to the everyday Alaskan, and maybe the next steps that it has to even getting a chance in heck to be seen.
Well, House Bill 252 is what I call the No Patient Left Alone Act. There's several others that have been passed across the nation, and this is simply allowing a patient, anyone who is admitted to a hospital, a nursing care facility, any medical facility, to have a support person by their side at any time, so that our loved ones are no longer dying alone. Through the pandemic, we just faced things that we never thought possible. We hear, I believe it was the first year of the pandemic, there was a 12-year-old girl who was in a car accident, and they would not allow her dad in to come and see her. And it was tragic. It was heart-wrenching. And I immediately contacted the Health and Social Services Commissioner and said, hell hath no fury like a parent who cannot reach their child in their time of need. And I said, do whatever you can to allow that father in to see his daughter. And finding out that government is limited when it comes to our hospitals and institutions in many ways, but there is something that we could do. And that is, we can say you cannot prevent someone from having a loved one present. And so I began looking at the patient's rights to have a support person, meaning it doesn't have to be a family member, because some people don't have a family member that can be by their side. Here in Alaska, we have people who their family is on the other side of the United States. And so having a friend who is kind of like family can be that person. You don't have to have an official process for this, but saying, regardless of your situation, if you're going in for surgery, if your loved one's on their deathbed, you can have a person there to be your advocate for you and to speak up for you. In Homer, one of my constituents said that her husband got COVID and he was feverish, and she had him tested, but it came back negative. And for 2 weeks, he was really struggling, and she had him tested again and it came back negative. And she said something just wasn't right, and he was feverish. And finally, she took him into the emergency room, and he tested positive. And they were asking him questions. How long have you had the fever? How long has this been going on? But what they didn't know is that his fever was much longer than what he had told him, because she found out what is now referred to as COVID brain, with oxygen depletion, you're not thinking clearly and recalling, everything that you've been through in your medical situation. And so she had parked herself outside the emergency room and demanded to see the doctors. And so she was able to fill in the gaps of important information to her husband. And they saved his life because he was almost in a place of heart failure.
Wow.
And if she hadn't have been there speaking for him, they wouldn't have known how to respond to him accordingly. And so we need people to be there for us in our most vulnerable times. And that's what this bill does. It simply says you have a right to have a support person in your time of need.
I love it. And, for those folks that are listening and think maybe, well, this stuff doesn't happen, or, it's once in a blue moon. I can tell you this, that Must Read Alaska got dozens and dozens and dozens of stories from folks, firsthand accounts where their loved ones, not necessarily all family members, some best friend kind of stories and those kinds of things where their family lives out of town, but their friends and family were dying alone in the hospital or being seen alone in the hospital, and the hospital administration refused to change their policies. You had a lot of good doctors and nurses that wanted to let these folks in, that wanted to do the right thing, but they're essentially just doing their job, and they have to do what they're told or they lose their job in a lot of these situations, especially when there's a medical emergency. Example, in Anchorage, there was a state of emergency declared for months and months and months and months in the city of Anchorage. And so it gave leeway to hospital administrations kind of doing these crazy things where they, your son's dying in a car wreck. It doesn't have to be COVID related. Your husband's dying of a heart attack. Well, sorry, they're going to die alone. And this is just the most ridiculous, ludicrous thing that I've seen. Representative Vance has told us a couple stories. I've heard stories firsthand myself. This is a issue. If this has happened to one or two people, that's one or two people more than it should have ever happened to. And so I commend you, Representative Vance, for doing a bill like this. What's some of, if I'm listening at home, how can I help? What can I do? Is there a hearing coming up? Is there emails that people can send in? Is there phone calls people can make? What can people do?
Absolutely. Thank you, John, for asking that, because having the engagement from the public is so vital to this process, to the legislative process. And I have made a bill hearing request right out of the gate when the session started, and have not heard if it will receive one yet. And so sending your emails really to all of the legislators saying that you want this bill, please vote yes on HB 252, and that we would love to have a hearing. We want these patient rights, would be so helpful. But you can also send them to me directly at rep.sarah.vance@akleg.gov. Also, going to the Alaska Legislative website is super easy, where you can get all of the emails and contact numbers for the legislators. But I'm specifically requesting this to be in the House. So first, and if you start there, that would be helpful in getting a bill hearing so that it can get support and go through this process so that we can have this right for patients. Because I would hate to have another pandemic come and this not be established for patients to be able to have a support person.
Yep. So if you're out there in the Facebook world or podcast world, and you want to help make a difference here with this bill, which I think is important, it's allowing folks not having to die alone in a hospital. That's a big deal. Make a phone call, send an email. It's very important. But also remember, when you do that, to be respectful, because common sense says if you call in and you're yelling at the representative's staff or sending emails with F-bombs in them, they're just less likely to take them serious. And so common sense would say to just be respectful. If you want to have influence and if you want to make a difference, send emails, make phone calls that are, you can be passionate, but just be respectful. That's what I would encourage folks to do. So Representative Sarah Vance, thank you so much for joining us on the Must Read Alaska show. I'll give you one last chance here at the end. Is there anything else you want to share before we go on what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for being on, and for the listeners. I just always want to encourage people that their engagement, their voice in government really matters. We need you to speak up now more than ever before. We are having public testimony on the budget, and we need to be able to make some wise decisions based upon the will of the people. And we can't do that without you speaking up. And as conservatives, we tend to wait until there's something really egregious that we speak up on. But I encourage you that we need your engagement right now on things that matter to you, and reminding the legislators that you have not changed your mind on certain issues, like the PFD, like you want a long-term fiscal plan. You want a solution while we have money flowing in. We need to hear that you have not changed your mind. And having those phone calls, those emails really does matter. So continue to be engaged. My office is available to you at any time. And please reach out to me you can find me on Facebook and a lot of other social media platforms at Rep Sarah Vance. But I'm available to you to answer your questions and help you get engaged right where you're at.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Representative Sarah Vance, for joining us. You have tuned into the Must Read Alaska show here on Facebook right now. You're going to be hearing us on the iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio later on this afternoon. But we want to thank everybody for listening today. We also want to thank our sponsor of this podcast, which I am so excited about. It makes me feel like we've come into the big leagues here. Charlie Pierce for Governor. We all love Charlie Pierce, but Charlie Pierce for Governor is sponsored the Must Read Alaska show. So we want to thank Charlie Pierce for Governor for sponsoring the show. Because of your sponsorship, you're allowing us to spread conservative news all around Alaska. So we want to thank you for that, Charlie Pierce for Governor. And for those of you that are looking forward to our next show, our new host, James Baisden, who's out here on the Kenai Peninsula as well. He's a City of Kenai elected city council member. He has our Friday morning show. So he'll be on the show Friday morning. I don't know who his guest is or anything, but I know he'll be there bright and early, maybe 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock here on Facebook. So tune in then. So until then, from somewhere in Alaska, signing off here, I'm John Quick. Thank you so much for joining us.